Hey everyone, it's Lexie. So in today's video I'll be sharing a few books I love but don't really talk about on this channel. So there's like a few books that I've really enjoyed over the years that I feel like don't get enough talking time on my channel because they get overshadowed by other ones, but these are ones nonetheless that I still really enjoy that I think you guys will as well. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So starting out, I first have a nonfiction read, and it is Quiet by Susan Cain. This is a book that I read a couple years ago, and it talks about the power of introverts. And I'm very much introverted, I'm very quiet, and I was always told at school by like peers and all that I will never be successful and I have to basically change who I am, and I have to be, you know, outgoing and all this stuff in order to be successful and have value. So I've always had that kind of conflict in me, like I'm very shy and I don't really, you know, unless I get to know you, like I'm, you know, can talk your ear off, but I'm very much shy and very much kind of you know, set myself back. But this book made me realize that I don't need to change who I am in order to be, you know, powerful or successful in what I do. It made me realize that, you know, I am perfect just the way I am and I don't need to change who I am. There's power in being an introvert. And you can see, like, I did tap a lot of this, like a lot of these parts in here really resonated with me, and I feel like, especially, I feel like in the BookTube community, or just people who read books tend to be a little bit more introverted, so I think you guys would really like this as well. I'm not very much into historical fictions, non-fictions, but I do really enjoy this one. It didn't read like a textbook. It was very much like the narration in here was really, really good. So next is a book that I read years and years ago, and I always just forget to talk about it on here, and it is What She Left Behind by Ellen Marie Wiseman. And basically this is a dual storyline where it follows a girl who is kind of going through the adoption process with her adopted parents, and her parents are part of the Historical Society, so they are going through this what was once basically an insane asylum during the 20s, where they would send women who either didn't want to get married or their husbands kind of, you know, just didn't want to deal with them anymore, like were sent there. And you get the dual storyline of the girl kind of learning more about this house, or like this, you know, hospital in present day, and then we also get flashbacks to the 20s with a girl who was kind of forced into here because she didn't want to marry the man who her parents wanted to. And it was just a very interesting story. I really loved learning about the kind of just society and like how people like would just discard women and place them in this thing because they didn't want to deal with them. Like, that is just crazy. Or how people view people with mental health issues and all that stuff. Like, it was very interesting, and I feel like I want to reread this because it was so good. But like, I think you guys, if you like historical fiction, this one was really good. The characters in here are just like, oh my goodness, I was so attached to them. So definitely, like I said, this book, it was so good and I loved it. This is another historical fiction that I read way before I started my BookTube channel, and it was The Storyteller by Jodi Picult. This is another kind of dual storyline of present day and past. So it follows this girl who owns a bakery, and she ends up crossing paths with this man who's very much beloved in the community. He's older, an older gentleman, and like everyone loves him. He's an umpire for like baseball. He volunteers. He's been an active member in this community for decades, but he ends up admitting that he was a notorious Nazi that escaped and has lived under a false identity since. And her grandmother was someone who survived the Holocaust, and so while she's also dealing with the, you know, shock of this man being a Nazi, her grandmother is recalling her story of when, you know, she was in Auschwitz, and then like these two storylines intercollide, and it is honestly so good. This is again another one that I feel like I don't talk about enough on my channel. I do tend to talk more about the more current books that I've read because this was like pre-BookTube days, but it was honestly so good. And it also is another book that deserves a reread because it was so good. just like, oh my goodness. So next, this is a series that I do tend to talk about, but because there's been such a lull in the books coming out that I feel like I haven't talked about it enough, and it is the Cormoran Strike series by Robert Galbraith or J.K. Rowling. And this was a series that I read like when, I feel like after, or like in between the first one and the second one coming out, so a couple years ago, and I loved it. I didn't know J.K. Rowling wrote this until after the fact, and I really love my dark crime novels, and this series is one that just gets better and better. I got my sister hooked on this series, she got her boyfriend hooked on this series, so like I said, everyone I recommend this to ends up loving it, and it gets better with each book, and you can tell like what she's building up to. So I like the third one is my favorite. The fourth one was really good as well. So like I said, like this one is just really nice. It is so good. It is, I don't know, I feel like this book doesn't get enough credit on here. I know people who have read this who like tend to read more YA, and they're like, oh, it's a J.K. Rowling book, and then they don't like it because they're like, oh, it's too dark. And I'm like, well, that's the point. So it's a little frustrating that these series doesn't, or like this series doesn't get enough love on BookTube, but those of you who have read this and love it, like we've gushed about this before. But yeah, this is just a really stellar series that I wish more people talked about, but I feel like I need to be talking about it more again because, like I said, it's probably one of my favorite crime series of all time. And finally, this is a book that I actually have been rereading with my aunt, and I loved it when I read it, and then I just totally forgot about it, but rereading it the second time made me realize how amazing this book is, and I'm like, why haven't I talked about this book more? And it is Lilac Girls by Martha Hall Kelly, and this is another historical fiction novel. I think the problem is with historical fiction is that I read so many of them that like some of them just, I forget about some of them, but it follows three women's stories during World War II. So we follow Kazia, who is a Polish woman who gets captured and sent to Ravensbrück. We get Herta, who is a German citizen who ends up becoming one of the notorious guards at Ravensbrück, and then Caroline, who is a socialite in New York, and all their stories kind of intertwined. But I forgot how, like, I read this during my master's, and maybe that's probably why I was a little spacey on it, but I forgot how engrossing this character, or this author is. Like, I get so drawn in with this book, and I forgot it. Like, I totally, like, I can read 50 pages and be like, oh my gosh, like, what? Like, I can be totally oblivious to everything else going on, but there's something so, like, something about the way this author writes that gets you totally drawn in. And yeah, I just forgot how much I loved this book. It's honestly so good. It's probably one of my actually favorite World War II novels, thinking about it. Yeah, but I've like was pinching myself because my aunt wanted to read this, and I was like, okay, like I've read it before, and I just forgot how awesome this book was. And I'm like, darn it, Lexie, you should have talked about this book more. Like, it deserves more praise. And I feel like in terms of like the standard of like the popular World War II novels that have been kind of flooding through, I feel like this one kind of flew under the radar, but it's just as good, if not better, than some of the popular ones that have been out. So like I said, this has not found newfound love in my life, and I hope you guys, if you like World War II historical fiction, you'll definitely like this, so please pick it up. So that's it, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what are some of the books that you love that a lot of people don't talk about. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.